right, welcome back, everyone, to the Roman Show. And in November, we got the huge Miami Book Fair coming back, pretty much to previous pre-pandemic times. And it's a great opportunity for you to meet some authors and learn about some of their writings and whatnot. And of course, one area that we love is sports. And Miami Dolphins, 1972. We're coming on already, 30th anniversary. It's crazy to think already. And right now, we have Mr. Marshall Jon Fisher. He wrote Miami 1972 and the NFL's only perfect season. And he will be a part of this great event in November at the Miami Book Fair. Mr. Marshall, thanks so much for your time. And thanks for writing this book. I hope to see the day, what you experienced one day when the Dolphins winning the Super Bowl. I don't think I'll ever get to see an undefeated season, maybe not. But at least a Super Bowl. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks.
So tell me about this book. So you ended up growing up here in South Florida, and you were a part of the whole 1972. You were around. Now, what were you doing that day? What were you doing when the Dolphins won the Super Bowl? Just curious.
I'm here in 1972. So in 72, I was 9 years old, and I was just kind of becoming a fan of the Dolphins. My brother and my dad had been big fans the last couple of years. And that was the first year I really was on board as a big fan. And, of course, that was a good year to begin, right? Because it was the perfect season. And I think that season had a big effect on everybody down here, and especially on kids who were growing up. It had made such an impact and really stayed with us. So, when I grew up, became a writer, and I always intended to write something about that year, that season in Miami. And with the 50th anniversary coming up, I finally got it done.
Crazy to think. Now, when you wrote this book, of course, there's still some of the players around. Every year they celebrate if they survive. Right now, the Eagles are enjoying their undefeated. Yeah. So hopefully we continue on with that. But how was putting in the work into this book and getting a hold of some of these players, getting some of the stories and telling it from a different aspect, not from a player's point of view, but from a different point of view?
Yeah, what I wanted to do in the book was, first of all, tell the story of the team and the season in as great detail as I could, but also to talk about each of the players as people and their stories, who they were, where they came from. And but again, also I had this different perspective from other things that have been written about them, which was the perspective of someone who was a fan, who was there, And so I wanted to sort of tell a little bit of a personal side to it as well. But it was really great getting to talk to the players. I interviewed, I think, 11 of them. Of course, many are gone now and others are not in great condition. But I talked to 11 players who were just great to talk to, and they were really happy to talk about this immense achievement that their team had.
Tell me about the difference from the fans today compared to then. Right now, 2022, right? Yeah. We have social media. Anybody can say anything nowadays. Back then, it would have been maybe talk radio, maybe some just TVs, the newspaper, of course. But how was it that the fans took this undefeated team and celebrated? And if that were to happen today, if the Dolphins were to repeat that, how do you think the fans will react today?
Yeah, well, it was very different back then, as you say. And it's funny, today with all the social media, as you said, in a way, fans are closer to the players because they can actually almost talk with them on social media, or at least get reactions from them, and they have that kind of experience. Back then, we didn't have that, but it was very different. The players were, I think, more like regular people back then. They were not so rich and famous. They were famous, but they didn't have the kind of salaries that led them to lead exclusive lives separated from other people. So they would live. Some of the players lived in the Cherry Grove neighborhood where a number of my friends lived, and they were their neighbors. And also after the games, the players parked in the same place as the fans, and they'd be walking through to their cars, and the fans would be tailgating and hand them a beer, and they'd kind of hang out with the fans a little.
Wow.
Larry Zonka talked about that a lot. So that's a big difference. Their salaries were such that a lot of them had got jobs in the off season, even though they had pretty good salaries at that point, but they weren't like millionaires, so it was a very different scene than today.
How much do you think that would have changed? Because you're right. You have social media, and you could in a way talk to them. But you mentioned the differences. Back then, you would park in the same parking lot. But even though nowadays they have their own parking lot, you're on that social media, so you're there. And that mentally as a player could impact you if you really get into the mean of things, into social media, what people are saying. I think it was Aaron Judge or one of these same players that they were on a winning streak. And you'll hear from other players too. If I'm on a streak, I stay away from social media because it's mentally, it can kind of destroy my vibe, to say the least.
Yeah, back then, really between players and fans, between players of different teams. As you say, you'd hear what other people are saying now. Back then, there was a lot more of a buffer zone between the players and the fans, and between themselves. Yeah.
So, what can you say about this book, and what can fans, the Dolphins fans, can take from it? But just NFL fans, football fans, or sports fans in general, what can they take from this book?
I'm sorry, I'm losing you. I didn't hear that one.
I said, what can fans, football fans, Dolphins fans, and just sports fans in general, or maybe I'm not a fan of football, but what can they take from this book?
Well, first of all, it's a portrait of a different time, a time gone by when it's a portrait of Miami in a way, which was a very different place back then, much less crowded, it was a smaller town back then, and I talk about that a lot, and also about the things that were going on at the time. I tried to weave into the story the issues, things that were going on during the day. And Miami was kind of a focal point for a lot that was going on in the country. Both national conventions took place on Miami Beach that summer during training camp. The Vietnam War was still going. The Watergate investigation was just getting going. And President Nixon was down here a lot because he had his place on Key Biscayne. So I think what people will get from this book is a portrait of everything that was going on during this magical football season.
You mentioned all those things happening, and then, of course, you have this wonderful story of the Dolphins going undefeated during those times. And, I mean, just looking back to today, comparing it to 2022, and we have so many problems going on. How nice was it to hear as a fan, or just because of population, right, that, look, we have something nice for all this stuff that's going on in the world, but there's a football team that's undefeated and it's never been done ever.
Yes, exactly. And, at the time, even though we're a very divided nation and society now, but it was true then too, in the 70s, there was a lot of protests against the war. And
right.
On the team, you had conservatives and you had liberals. You had kind of a crew cut conservative types like Earl Morrall and Bob Greasy, Howard Twilley. But you also had more liberal types with the long hair and the bushy mustaches, but they all got along under Don Shula. He really brought them together and united them with this common cause to get back to the Super Bowl, which they had lost the year before, and to get back there and win it. And they really, all these very different kinds of people on this team were able to come together as really the perfect team and just meld perfectly. So I do think there's a lesson in that, and it's kind of nice to hear about.
And I think you mentioned that in the book as far as how everybody's so diverse mentally and overall, but everyone came together to put that team together and win a Super Bowl undefeated. Has never been done. Hopefully we carry on to that record for a very, very long time. Do you ever think, though, that we'll ever get to see another team do that?
Well, of course the Patriots came extremely close in 07, but other than that, no one's come really very close. I mean, even the teams that had just one loss, it wasn't at the end of the season, So who knows? If they play football long enough, someday someone will do it again. But the more they keep adding games and adding playoff rounds, it makes it less and less likely. So I think it's going to be a long time.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Marshall, I want to thank you for your time. Again, Miami 1972 and the NFL's only perfect season. Available for purchase right now. You could also check out the Miami Book Fair. You'll be out there as well speaking to the fans. But what can are you just going to have like a one-on-one, speak to the folks out there, ask some questions?
Yeah, I'll be at the Book Fair on the 19th, I think, at 3 p.m. And I'm going to do a slideshow presentation, show a lot of photos of the team back then and the city and a little bit of video maybe. But also, I'll be talking, kind of presenting the book, kind of setting it up. And of course, I'll take questions and at the end.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mr. Marshall. Enjoy yourself here in Miami for the book fair, and hope to talk to you very soon.
Thanks, Rodolfo. I enjoyed it.
thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we'll catch you next week right here on the program. Make sure you head out there to the Miami Book Fair. And listen, it's the final episode of Combate Global this weekend, November 18th, a Friday. Great fight card lined up for you. Check that out. Paramount Plus, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can check that out. I'll be on there calling the action. Look forward to see you, all of you. With that being said, stay safe. Cheers, everyone. Till next one. You haven't been on?